there and welcome everyone to this webinar on why your digital training is failing and how to solve it. I'm your host today, Ben Hurrell, Director of Learning, but I'll tell you a little bit more about me as we progress through this session. Today we are talking about this big topic, digital training, whether it be online modules, the virtual learning experience, or any sort of remote work of facing and encountering learning in the workplace. It's been one of the biggest factors to address our industry in the last couple of years. How do we keep them engaged? How do we ensure performance? How do we reduce the speed to competence for our onboarding? It's a big topic, and that's what we're diving into today. Before we start, I'd like to move on just to our housekeeping, to those of us who joined Jugo. Big thing for me, and I'm sure for any learning professional joining this session as well, is I'd love to see your faces interacting with me in this session. So please do keep your cameras on. View this session in full screen to experience all the joy and functionality. If there are any questions throughout, please raise your hand for a Q&A, the options at the bottom, and click the green icon if you are struggling at all for any support in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. We'll be talking a lot about learning virtually today and how to get the most out of platforms. So please make sure today you interact as fully as possible. Enjoy throwing questions, interacting through the emojis, and keep yourself fully immersed in this session. Fantastic. Housekeeping out the way, let me tell you a little bit about me. So as I said before, my name is Ben Hurrell, and I'm the Director of Learning here at Jugo. My role is to make sure that our people create the most amazing immersive experiences for you. My background is in learning and development and training, where for the last 10 years I've worked for some of the biggest names in the UK and abroad, either in-house or as an external consultant working around the world, designing learning programs which drive sales performance, customer experience and leadership. The reason I exist is to leverage the best practice in training and development to create meaningful learning experiences that help people achieve their performance objectives. And that's where I'd like to start today, talking about achieving those performance objectives. We know the world has changed, and a lot of our teams may be gone fully remote or partly hybrid, and that presents us a challenge in learning and in operations in a business of how we get our people up to speed, make sure that they're learning effectively, and make sure that knowledge retention remains key to ultimately drive the right behaviors and fundamentally lead to the results which you need to as an organization. It's said quite a lot that people are more productive from home, with one recent study saying that 51% of people feel more productive working from home as well, and 27% of employers are recording increased productivity from home and remote employers. It's clear to us that it is here to stay. So how do we design learning programs, especially digital, remote, online, that help people meet the outcomes they need to and ultimately drive forward on performance? I'd like to hear a little bit from the group, actually, jump straight in with some talking points around what you think works best when you are trying to design and create learning experiences that are remote. So I'd like to bring up a short poll, and I'd love to get your insights into it. So just up here, you will notice, how do you and your people learn best in a remote environment? There's a couple of options there and 30 seconds on the clock. So as a group, think about it. Now, remote environments can be from home or could be telecommunication from afar into a different office. But ultimately, thinking about it as a remote or hybrid employee, how do you learn best? What are some of the topics that matter most to you? Fantastic. The poll is closed, so thank you very much for your insights there. And the results are in. So how do you and your people learn best in a remote environment? Well, the one that came out on top there very, very clearly and very, very quickly is in a way that captures and maintains my attention for the whole session. That is no surprise that that came up. The world that we live in now is so different to what it was a few years ago, especially in learning. Before, in a classroom environment, all I had to worry about was what time's lunch, who's walking past, and God help me if it ever snowed outside, that was engagement absolutely done and out of the way. But now I'm competing against the whole world with remote employees, keeping people engaged in a session, whether it might be that the people I'm training are getting a ding on their phone from the latest Amazon offer, finding something from their bank coming through, finding love through a dating app, or catching a Pikachu through Pokemon Go. I'm very aware that that's a very 2016 reference, and I probably should update them a little bit more. But the point stands, team, that we need to capture and engage people for the whole session. The Learning Performance Institute regularly recommends in the world of learning that we encourage our people to interact in a session, in a learning session, every 3 to 5 minutes in that as well. So every 3 to 5 minutes, getting people engaged and onboarded to make sure they're fully immersed in the session. Because you're not just competing about what's going on in their life. Dings on Teams, keeping people away from their email, engaged, contributing, interacting with others is also a key point that popped out there. So how do we keep people interacting in the right way? Now, whether you are designing a beautiful piece of SCORM compliant e-learning or delivering a virtual session, the point remains, how do you keep people engaged, on board, in the session without any distraction around them? That to me is going to form quite a bit of what I talk about today in kind of digital learning and how to solve that challenge. Because one of the biggest points of failure for learning is keeping people immersed and engaged in the environment. The other 2 points on that poll, giving people the opportunity to be fully immersed, to interact with others on a human level, something that is the challenge greatly for remote workers, but also that opportunity to interact every 3 to 5 minutes to enable them. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. And that really fits into my reason for existing of leveraging the best practice in training and development, creating meaningful learning experiences. Now, why do I call it learning experiences? Now, that to me is a key critical point, not a training session. A training session is something you can attend, but a learning experience is something you have to take part in. And that's really critical for me, how we leverage technology digitally to help people feel at home in the virtual learning environment. So bringing that up then, talking about what a learning experience is, this is a model that we should apply across all of our learning programs, whether that be digital in a pure kind of e-learning format, but really critically for any learning program where you're looking to actually change your behavior, where you are looking to generate results. The 3 key elements of this learning experience formula based on my experience and success is there are three streams. Firstly, engage the learners ahead of the learning. The second, drive participation through interactivity and collaboration. And thirdly, embed and sustain that learning to demonstrably drive performance. Demonstrably drive performance. Because that's what we all want. That's the organizations we work in. They want to make sure that learning is seen as a profit lever and never a cost. So taking these 3 elements, going through them in a little bit more detail before taking them one-to-one, and packing this session full of useful tips that you can take to help design and deliver the most amazing learning experiences. We take them bit by bit. So the first part on here is engage. So engage learners ahead of the learning, whether that's through media, events, trailers, marketing principles, participation, whether that be through beautiful immersive platforms such as this, or in a classroom, or even paired up in Jugo's meeting space. We need to get participation and interactivity, the space to collaborate, and embedding and sustaining that learning through leadership, through reflective practice. These 3 elements turn it into an experience, not a training session. A training session will pour knowledge into the people you are training, but it will very, very rarely lead to sustainable results. Some of you might be familiar with the Ebbinghaus curve that states that by the end of about 2 weeks to a month, 80% of what is learned in a classroom alone will be lost. Or you might be a big advocate of Charles Jennings' 70-20-10, where 10% of learning happens in the classroom, 20% through coaching, and 70% is on-the-job learning. All of these models come out and they say the same thing, that training in of itself It can be fantastic at inspiring the learning, at pouring the knowledge, but doesn't always bring the wisdom. So how can you use immersive platforms and other techniques to help across all three areas and help drive performance, behaviors, and positive outcomes? Let's take them step by step. Let's move on and let's deep dive into engage and see if I can give you some tips to drive engagement. Now, we've all been used to receiving marketing, how we get the great marketeers of our time delivering great adverts that go viral, that help inspire us and change our consumer behaviors. And fundamentally, there's a lot we can learn in learning, ironically, a lot we can learn in learning from the world of marketing, whether it is capturing attention, connecting the what's in it for me is a very critical piece. If we want to buy something, if we want to attend something, if we want to develop our careers, it is critical we go into it with a sense of what we are going to get out of it. I'm not calling all learners selfish. That's human nature. We want to know the why should I attend? Why should I invest my time and effort into this? This is where we can use marketing principles and techniques to help drive the success of our training. Taking, for example, technology, there's lots of materials that we can create, even generating to things like AI now can provide an opportunity to create useful handouts to spark curiosity, drive that idea of what's in it for me. Rich media as well. I think it's always something to consider, that creating a great trailer or a interview about the success of the program around the outcomes that you plan to get out of it, and showcasing your senior sponsor in a really engaging way can help you drive forward and get engaged. I will say with media, I think what is really, really important now in L&D is something I definitely have seen in the industry, is the ability of learning professionals to create beautiful aid memoirs, trailers, and rich media is very varied. Some people are fantastic at it. Some people have really good networks with their marketing teams. Fundamentally, it's a skill that learning and development do need to push, because we want to make sure the things that we develop look good. And you might think, is that important just to have something that looks pretty? Is it important to create these beautiful environments just because they look engaging? Yes, it's critical. Absolutely critical. Big shift and change in the last 10 years is our expectations as consumers and learners have increased hugely. You just think about it. If you saw an advert come out from Apple that looked like it was written in Comic Sans and designed in Microsoft Paint, well, you would be immediately disengaged. And whilst that is an extreme example, hopefully you see my point, that unless we're creating finalized, finished, glossy products that we're putting out into people to engage them, our trailers, our leaflets, are using our best practice about designing effective learning outcomes which are designed to target the behaviors that are going to lead them to success, then the expectation is going to be lower. And in terms of imagery as well, we live in a 4K Ultra HD world now, and if you don't believe that that's important, I would challenge you after this session to go on YouTube and turn the quality down to 360p and see if you can sit through a full video. I don't think any of us can. The importance of a glossy visual should not be understated, and if you can add in some magical infographics within that as well that help shortcut people's knowledge to see what's in it for them to attend, well, that's going to only lead to success. But that also takes me to other ways of doing it. We're used to receiving content now, and with the rise of AI, our ability to understand content just to quickly glance over words has kind of taken a bit of the fun out of it, but it has provided an opportunity to bring to life the human connection. If I was to design a showcase, as I have many times, to get people engaged into learning, using a platform that allows you to bring those speakers into the room, bring everybody together as a cohort of people going through it to create a sense of shared endeavor, and be able to showcase the outcomes of the learning in a beautiful space such as this auditorium, well, that's only going to help connect people to the messaging you want to achieve and give you a sense of the engagement behind that as well, by how they interact with our wonderful emojis and polls and chats, really giving them a chance to have a voice around what they want to get out of the training, enabling we as learning professionals to be able to tailor content, provide information in the right way, and connect the learner with the senior stakeholder, the business, the customer. Creating events to kick off learning programs, especially in leadership, onboarding, sales and service, is hugely powerful. Do not neglect the human in what you are doing. The more engaged your audience is, the more likely they are to not only attend, participate, interact with your learning, but they'll have that vested interest in it, meaning they are less likely to be distracted by the ringing ding of Tinder and your bank and Amazon. So keeping people engaged and being firmly rooted in your sessions doesn't start with the moment you start at 9 o'clock with a coffee in your hand. It starts well before in how you engage your audiences. But what next? We have this beautifully engaged audience. They know what's in it for me. They're positively chomping at the bit to get involved and start learning. If we have an engaged audience, you're halfway there. But that doesn't mean it's a home run already. You have to consider your participation. As we talk about participation in what we're doing, is we should think about how you are driving effective participation in online learning. It's a big topic. So I want to share in this section a few of the techniques that I've been using globally across different cultures, countries, and languages to help drive participation in live online learning. Now, earlier on, I mentioned to you all about the LPI's sense of getting interaction every 3 to 5 minutes. It's critical. The more opportunities you have to engage and immerse people are gold. We need to keep doing it. One of the key ways of actually telling engagement in a moment, as a facilitator, as I'm looking around Jugo in the space in the auditorium here, I'm seeing a lot of people fully engaged in the session, focusing on the messaging that's coming out. Driving actually camera on rate feels like a little bit of a vanity metric, but it's really, really not. Jugo have been working quite closely with a number of clients for different purposes, and our ability to naturally drive camera on rates is a really good indicator for us on employee engagement. So seeing people themselves, connecting people in this and other virtual environments that we use has really given us great insights in the back end as well about engagement. So encouraging camera on is not always an easy behavior. If I look back to the beginning of COVID, when the whole world went virtual, then it was very much people wanting to be camera off, and it was a real labor of love for us learning professionals, getting people engaged and onboarded in the session to get onto the cameras. But that behavior started to change in environments like this as they've innovated, and the improvement in technology has really helped people feel connected to the session. So that's always my first starting point, is having no passengers. Don't have passengers on your sessions. You want to sit their camera off. Now, of course, there are always going to be exceptions or rules or potentially technical reasons, but most of those can be overcome. Get involved, connect with a human. You know, that's it. That's one of the biggest drivers, that human connection, especially for remote workers and virtual employees, is getting people engaged and immersed and connected to the people they work with. It has a demonstrable impact on employee engagement. Now, we know that 84% of employees who are engaged are likely to still be here in 12 months. So keeping them engaged through training, building connections along your business, we want to make sure that they're fully connected as well, especially as it costs sometimes between 33% and for senior execs like 150% of their annual salary to replace them through training and lost revenue. Well, we want to make sure that we keep and retain as many people. It's one of those hidden metrics in L&D that we can absolutely influence, especially in a remote organization, if we deliver amazing, world-class, interactive, virtual, live online learning. So absolutely keeping people engaged and developed as well. So participation, what does it actually mean in a session? I hear you ask. So participation in session can be measured in a few different ways. For me, when I'm delivering, I'm looking for seeing who is engaging with the emojis, who's jumping into the chat, who is engaged and making eye contact on the camera, who here is ready to wave and point and give thumbs up throughout. Getting some form of interactivity every 3 to 5 minutes is essential, no matter what your subject content. Now, that doesn't have to be a big thing. In sessions like this, I can easily bring somebody up onto the big screen and have an interview style conversation with them, or bring them into the space and have a very human connection. Now, that's one way of doing it, giving somebody a large platform to interact. But even if it's an emoji, a task, a poll, watching a video, collaborating in a breakout space and being able to put learning into practice in a virtual environment, we should design learning experiences which help drive that and fundamentally make sure that we are creating that sense of engagement and interactivity, but replicating those opportunities for human connection. Never underestimate the power of a breakout session on a platform, whether in a separate meeting or within platform, giving people the opportunity to collaborate with your ability to get involved in that as well. It's a hugely powerful tool. And then when you bring everybody together, it's using the full functionality of suites like Jugo, with emojis, with chats, with camera, with voice, to get people involved every 3 to 5 minutes, even in a small way. That and the ability to have the opportunity to practice is what makes learning virtually one of the most exciting ways to do it, because you can connect with humans and people and interact with audiences across vast geographical ranges, people you'd never really worked with, people you can represent from your organization to come and work together where they might not normally ever have the opportunity. That's the true power of participation, is bringing those humans together and connecting them. Now you might think, Ben, that's everything. We've engaged an audience. They're chomping at the bit from our wonderful video trailers and our beautiful kickoff meeting where we brought everybody together and shared their expectations well in advance. We brought them into an amazing virtual environment that immersed them in 3D in an auditorium. We gave them the opportunity to connect and interact every 3 to 5 minutes. Well, of course, everything I've done now has made learning inevitable now. Success and behavior will be changed. Well, not quite. We're still missing a puzzle, the learning experience trifecta. And that's what I'd like to talk to you guys about now. So sustaining and embedding the learning. Now, this is one is really critical for me and is often overlooked. If we are engaging our audience, we know what's going to be in it for them. We know what they want to do. If we have delivered a great learning experience, as I'm sure many of you can do, then they will have enjoyed it. They would have given you happy smiley faces on the feedback form. I'm sure many of you will be familiar with Kirkpatrick's levels of evaluation. And if you're not, give me the quick highlights. Kirkpatrick's model of evaluation is a 4-step fundamental standard for learning and development evaluation. Whereas phase 1, we look at the reaction. How much did they enjoy the session? Do you feel that you've had a chance to participate? Was learning made easy for you? Phase 2, around the knowledge and retention. And remember, that's important for us because 80% of what's learned can be lost. And I'll come back to that one in a minute. Phase 3 is understanding the behaviors. Have we generated a behavior change or new behaviors or skills? And level 4 then being our results. Have we impacted the number, whatever that might be? And some could say the 5th step is return on investment as well. So I'm sure you're very aware. But how we sustain and embed learning is as important as the learning experience itself because of those 4 levels. Taking them at the first point, we want to make sure reactionary feedback. We want to make sure that the learning experience that they had was recorded and we can learn from it. Whether that through polls at the end of a session or more typically an online form available normally for free to get those sorts of insights around what was learned in the session, what you're going to take from it, was the facilitator handsome, dashing, and all the rest of it. But also we want to make sure that the experience was good to learn from the future. That's important, but that's where a lot of us stop our learning and development evaluation. And increasingly, if we want to be seen as a profit lever and not a cost, we want to be able to develop that further. So reactionary feedback, especially in a live virtual environment like this, is brilliant. But how do we record knowledge? This is one of the beautiful things about breaking people into spaces, into meetings, to observe knowledge in action through scenario practice. Little tip, never call it role play. People hate role play, always call it scenario practice. But if you do that, you will be able to see it in action, and also some of the level 3 behaviors. Once you have done those 3 things, actually measuring the results, the impact, creating a baseline to what you want to be, you can do that. Within a lot of platforms, Jugo especially, one thing we specialize in is providing insights with our program as well. So being able to see what engagement was like in the session from the amount of interaction and the camera on, we find that information in learning very, very useful to be able to know which parts of our training really land and which places maybe not. But we are very much focused on delivering a great experience here, whether that be remote on Jugo or not. The idea of sustaining and embedding the learning doesn't just come from how we measure, though. It also comes from how we create a culture of ongoing performance through learning, especially for remote employees. Consider a moment you are a remote employee. You are not sat in front of your manager every single day. You are trusted and enabled, and you are judged on your outcomes. But fundamentally, every single day, they might see your outcomes as a manager, but they might not see the journey you go on. They might not understand the collaboration that you have to make, the process you have to follow. They might not understand your creative journey and where you are fantastic at being creative, or a bit like me, absolutely terrible at spelling and execution. So these kind of areas for a leader are really important. No matter what you're training, a leader has to understand their process. So one thing I will always encourage is bringing together people into virtual spaces regularly to do scenario practice, process reviews, any sort of collaborative space. At Jugo, we utilize the whole full power of the internet, whether it is Mentimeters or Miro boards, and bring that into our virtual space to enable us to collaborate effectively. There are many, many tools out there. The power of the internet is huge, but using those as a tool for effective leader conversations is critical. And that's one of my biggest points for here. It's about how we enable leaders. Leaders have to be an important part of your coaching journey. If you're a learning professional, one thing you are probably not going to be able to do is spend a lot of time being really close to a group of people post-learning. Part of it we will do, if we have the opportunity, might be through an academy process for new starters, or maybe some one-to-one follow-up coaching. But the everyday for our remote and virtual and hybrid employees, we have to get advocacy from the leaders. I have a few ways that can be done that. There's carrot and there's stick. So sometimes it's involved influencing your senior leadership to be quite directive of the expectations for leaders and coaches to support teams. But often I find the most success is to evangelize your team leaders and managers to understand what the power of coaching is, the power of human connection, and bring their teams into immersive virtual spaces that help enable that human connection, that engagement. Remembering again that employees who are engaged are much more likely to stay and thrive, and that 27% of them feel that they are more productive because they are more able to effectively use their time. So let's piggyback on that. Let's drive that increased productivity and connect the human once again in beautiful spaces such as this. So that's one part, is the leaders. But if you want to create a truly amazing ongoing culture of performance. It's not just about pushing that learning onto people. It's also about enabling the people post your learning intervention, whether it be program, one-off session, or coaching, connecting people together to reflect in their own way. Some of you may be familiar with the term action learning group or action learning set. I am a huge advocate. I have seen this one change of adding action learning, adding up to 20% increased revenue to some businesses, reducing the time to competence for new leaders and new starters in a business. Bring together groups of learners into spaces and facilitate conversations in a coaching style, helping people find their own path and journey, reflecting on what's been learned, how they're applying it, and keeping each other engaged and involved to be able to drive that forward. That is super powerful. And how you do that remotely and virtually is giving people that carrot, telling the value stories of how these experiences make a massive difference. So using, even in Jugo, when people are here and around, all contributing, having a facilitator that might not even be yourself, sat in the middle behind the desk, holding court around all of the conversations that are going on, making the most of the chat and emojis and shared documentation. This is a fantastic opportunity for people who are remote to still come together and learn, whether it is a lunch and learn where everybody eats together, or even a 15-minute stand-up where people are reflecting and bringing challenges that they have together. When we're creating a learning culture, you need the leaders, the individual, but also reporting that learning culture to the business. I talked about engagement right at the top of this session and how critical it is, but producing materials that report on your success across all 4 of Kirkpatrick's levels, all the way up to results, but also the human stories that can be recorded in platforms, meetings of people coming together and presentations, and sharing and cascading what we've learned, and then critically, what differences it's made to the business, will only lead you to more success. And I encourage you to drive that forward on there. Before we wrap up on the session and go to Q&A, I'd just like to kind of move on from this for a topic for a second and just run my quick summary. My best practice, Ben's tips, if you will. First point, there is a learning experience formula. Engage, participate, embed, and sustain. When engaging, immersive kickoff meetings, marketing principles, e-learning that brings the knowledge so you can turn it into wisdom. Trailers and more can shortcut the learner to understand the WIFM. If you don't know what I mean by WIFM, I assure you, you probably all had one right at the top of this session. Understanding what is in it for me. We use Jugo to create kickoff events for longer and more complex programs, but you can use it for anything here to bring people together and talk about what we do. Engagement is key. And once you have them engaged, you drive forward to participation. Interactivity is key. Remember, you are challenged by everything going on, knocks on the door, the dog needing feeding, keeping people away from their emails and in your session every 3 to 5 minutes. Collaborate, use every tool, not as a gimmick, but as a tool. Be thoughtful, make it an experience and not a lesson. At Jugo, we leverage all the power of the internet and immersive environment through Miro boards, through integration to bring any web-based service alive and using it collaboratively. And however good your learning experience is, finally, never forget it is only as good as how well you embed and sustain. If you want to see the impact that you desire, you have to embed and sustain the learning through leadership activity, coaching, and reflective practice. Bringing people together in amazing platforms like this can help people bring back to the learning space. If you're a big NLP fan, you can use it as an anchor. Capture the lightning that you had in the session. So that's my 3 large points, and I would just like to kind of, as we move on from this one, is just get a little bit from the group to understand if there are any questions that we have from today's session. Fabulous. Any questions? Oh, hi.
Hello. Hi, Ben.
Hi. Welcome, welcome, welcome
Wow, look at this.
Thanks for
This
joining
is
me.
amazing. Wow. Wow, this is amazing. I've really enjoyed your session, Ben, specifically around sustainable learning. I think that's really fascinating to hear more about. Um, but whilst you were talking at the end there, specifically talking about engage, participate, and embed, I was wondering, which one do you feel is the most critical area of focus for L&D professionals, do you think?
That's a fantastic question. So if I had to allocate it percentages, I'd probably do 20, 40, 40. And I think that my maths works out on that one. So the reason I say it is, whilst engagement is very important, it's also something that people are a little unfamiliar with. There can be a natural consensus that there's going to be something into learning. I can send out an invite. People are grown-ups, fundamentally. So I think it adds a lot to it. I've seen it work really, really well with entry level. I've seen it work really well on onboarding, and especially for leaders who are always inexplicably busy, to understand what's going to be in it for them. But that split then between participation and engagement, I would probably debate and argue with myself. Delivering a great session that is interactivity, that has some form of interactivity every 5 minutes, utilizes everything available in the world to keep people in the session and learning, is a skill in of itself. But I look at the world, I look at how we maximize return on investment from our platforms, from our people, from our learning, and I lead myself to the inevitable conclusion that the most critical area of focus for learning and development, operations, marketing even, is always going to be on that ability to activate, embed, and sustain learning. The cost of the information you train, however charismatic you are, the logic of 80% fades. If you do nothing, 80% fades. Now, if you do things right, that's not a fair statistic, but giving people the opportunity to put learning into practice, collaborate in virtual spaces, feel engaged and part of a team, that's really going to drive not just learning effectiveness, but also behaviors, business performance, staff engagement. And when I look at the range of metrics a learning and development team can support, especially for remote employees, it's not just around hitting a sales number or a service level. It's also about employee engagement, connected together, pulse and ESAT scores, net promoter scores, fundamentally retention, and ultimately the bottom line of a business. That is driven through your ability to embed and sustain, whether that is through your leader or through your packs or through anything else that you can do to help drive that. So I got there the long way around there, Holly, because I was having a debate with myself. I think they're all very, very important. But the idea of embedding and sustaining learning, whether that is being joining in on the calls, in participative spaces, collaborative working, reflective practice, journaling, and one-to-ones, putting in, encouraging and activating the leaders that, what did you learn? What have you applied? What can I help you do and learn more of? For a leader in a one-to-one environment, that is critical.
Yeah, for sure.
So I hope we got there in the end, Holly, but hopefully that answers your question.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
Brilliant. So as time gets to us, and I'm back, I would like just to talk a moment about these three things and how Jugo can help. So if we would bring up some encouragement. Now, Jugo is a powerful platform. Today, you've enjoyed just part of it, of your ability to interact, engage, be brought to the front. And we've demonstrated how Jugo itself can support people to create better, tangible learning outcomes and behaviors being changed because of the level of interactivity and because of the versatility of how a learning team can do it. But there is more, and every organization is slightly different. And we'd love to show you a little bit more about it. So if you'd like to understand for yourself how Jugo can can drive performance in your business, improve retention, drive engagement, and fundamentally improve business performance. We'd love to get some time with you to be able to showcase the product to you and make sure that you can see all of the value that it can bring to your organization. So to meet me or one of the team, there's a QR code just above me. If you want to scan that one, join us in for a demo, and we would love to spend the time with you, showcasing you the power of bringing back that human connection. But as we wrap up today, it is just down to me to say a huge thank you to the people who've joined me today and to the people who've enjoyed watching this. And I look forward to hearing about how you've experienced Jugo moving forward. Thank you, everyone.